organizations. And finally, oracles, and this is where I'm getting to. Just yesterday, we announced that, or I should say API3 announced the funding round led by Placeholder together with CoinFund, and there's a bunch of other great investors in the round, including Pantera and DCG and so on and so forth. But this is an area that I think has been generally like underserved by different projects. I think Chainlink has been kind of the main and most visible player in that space. But API3 brings a really interesting approach to on-chain data. And what it's basically saying is, every Oracle network and Oracle system that has come before essentially has the same architecture. And that architecture is there's a bunch of sort of first party providers of data. Think Google, right? Google is providing APIs on weather and traffic and maps and all of this stuff. And historically, what we've done is we've created decentralized networks where there's a bunch of like intermediaries that go and take that Google data and put it on chain. And those intermediaries, they themselves act in this like decentralized manner. They have a consensus protocol. They have to agree on what API data is correct. And it's generally been pretty costly to do that. It creates attack vectors where, some of the nodes in that network can go ahead and start being malicious and try to attack the network. In practice, there's been a bunch of issues with centralization, with terms of services for the APIs that are going on chain. Are we complying with terms of services? And so what API3 is doing is saying, hey, wait a minute, can we do a slightly different architecture where we kind of like, get rid of these intermediaries and just go to the first party provider directly and say, you know what, here's a little piece of software. If you can integrate this software into your API, you don't have to get Ether, you don't have to get connected to any network, you just have to integrate this little piece of software. But once you do, anyone on Ethereum can pay the gas and query your API, and that API goes directly on the blockchain. So it's sort of cutting out this kind of inefficient like intermediary set of players and saying, can the person who's creating the data, can the first party just put the data basically directly on the blockchain? And so that's super exciting. If we can get some traction around that, I think it will go very far in terms of getting a lot of new data into smart contracts.
Yeah, so that means like many new assets that can sort of potentially use DeFi, right? Like instead of just crypto assets.
Well, I would say it would mean that like even DeFi could access many new kinds of information. For example, I worked on a project in blockchain which was called Etherisk, and one of their first products, which I worked on, was called flight delay insurance. And this was literally like this was out in 2016. It was already possible on Ethereum. But what you do is if you were taking a plane, you could go ahead and buy some insurance, and if your plane was late, then the smart contract would automatically pay you out, basically a reward, an insurance payout, insurance premium. And so the way that worked was at that time, it was a centralized Oracle that went to, some third-party API that gave you, flight delay information. And you could see this applied to weather, right? If you can get weather onto the blockchain, you could start writing weather insurance. If you can, if you can start getting, I don't know, TV ratings or election results. I mean, there's a world of data that you can now start integrating into like on-chain smart contract processes that make the smart contracts a lot smarter and a lot more interesting. So that would be an exciting world.